Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is the after show to my talk with PZ Myers, the second talk. And so I'm here with RJ Downard and going to go for it. And we are going to discuss the talk. And if you have questions, then feel free to ask them. So what did you guys think about the talk?
I came in just a little late and was busily taking notes and acting as a point person to try to fill in material because I knew a lot of subjects were going to be coming up, and I thought I could play a role as, oh, here's the reference that they were referring to.
Yeah, you sent us the paper on the inside-out hypothesis that Nestle was referring to.
Yeah, very, very new, and so it's understandable that you might not know about it. It hasn't had a chance for the dust to settle yet, although I did find that other paper that William Miller put up just in the Royal Society from 2015, where he included it in the discussion of the endosymbiotic process. So it's presumably filtering through the system. And it all, I think if Meyer looks at it more, he'll find it intriguing because it involves that issue of in what order did everything happen? What was the precursor system? And there's always the sneaking suspicion I have that we can't always presume that the biology of living bacteria and organisms is the same as the one at the early stages of the process. And there's that idea that, oh, something different may have been going on there that we no longer see because it's all been buried in billions of years worth of things settling down. And I think that's kind of a relevant one. So it's all fun trying to poke around to see what's happening with Luca and all of its cute little cousins.
Out. You dropped out 12.
Oh, I don't know why. I'll
James dropped off. Jackson? So am I alone now?
Me?
Oh wait, they're back.
Can you hear me?
You're breaking up a little bit.
Am I? Okay.
I closed off all the tabs and everything.
Looks like you're fine now.
The only tabs I have. I was disconnected for a moment there. Okay. Oh, can you guys hear me?
You're still breaking up, Jackson.
You pop in and out, but we're still getting most of it.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Oh man, the internet is not good. Thanks. I turned off my camera just so might help a little bit.
The rats are the little internet mice are going as fast as they can in their little cages to keep the internet going.
Maybe it's the creationists trying to cut our line.
Yeah, yeah.
So we can't discuss them. And so anyways, but yeah, it's very interesting, and it's something that we'll have to look forward to hearing more research about in the future, I guess. I thought it was interesting how on the paper it said, how on the first link that Nestle showed us, it said the eocyte, which I think is interesting because that's the eocyte hypothesis is kind of contrary to the three-domain idea, isn't it?
Yeah. There's a lot of fun little controversy over what's going on at the deepest levels of stuff, and I haven't researched fully into identifying whether there are fighting words camps. That's often you find in cutting edge science is there's cliques and groups of people who may be the ones advocating the position, and they may be a minority or not position, and if sometimes that can be a third rail aspect. The paper would be relevant all on its own in relation to the origin of deep systems, because it's highly likely that at some point some intelligent designer is going to stumble into it and try to make some authority quoting out of it. So it's always nice to be ahead of the game on it. That's why I looked up to see whether or not there had been any further work on it, because although 2013 is fairly recent, 2014.
Mhm.
It's still it's enough time that there would be either buzz or not on it. So it looks like there hasn't been a huge amount of buzz on the theory, and we'll see what happens with time passing on it.
Interestingly, OneZoom, the phylogeny page they use the Eocyte hypothesis. They put DPAN and TAC as their own little branch separate from the Archaeans, which I thought was interesting. And then they put Loki Archaeota and then the eukaryotes, which I thought that was very intriguing because they adhere to the Eocyte hypothesis, even though if you look in the textbooks here in college, for the most part, you'll see the 3-domain rule or the 3-domain hypothesis.
It's all partly because they're trying to ferret out what the dynamics were in the formation of deep roots that are billions of years ago, and we can't assume that the versions that we see in their descendants now are entirely representative of what they were doing billions of years ago. That inevitably complicates the situation. So I would be gobsmacked if systematists didn't have a little bit of knockdown, drag-out fistfights at these deep roots, in the same way that it's tricky with the Cambrian explosion and trying to work out the roots of higher-level metazoans at that deep root, because you just don't have a data set. So you're having to work everything back by retro-engineering, and that's not easy.
Yeah, that was actually something got to talk about with PZ. Some of that, a little bit of that paleogenomics. I was thinking of you when I was
that must have been in the early section, because I did come in a little late on it. That's just a fascinating area, and all on its own merits, independent of the fact that it's thumbing its nose at creationists, because it's just trying to piece together stuff. It started out at the base level with proteins, so you're operating at the structural gene level. But now it's already progressed over the last 10 years into looking at more and more of the regulatory cascades and tweaking them. The one thing that was fascinating about the bird case is that when they reconstructed that bird beak, or retro-engineered the pre-bird beak from the dinosaurs, it involved a gene cluster that hadn't been implicated before. They came at it from a different direction, and there was a little bit of a knockdown.
RJ, you're cutting out again.
Oops, I'm sorry. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to correct it.
RJ?
I do not know how to correct it. I do not know how to correct it.
He was fine here.
Was he? Okay, maybe it's... maybe it's mine. I don't know.
I'm afraid your microphone is going. I can feel it.
You'll have to... Okay, well, Peter, you have to tell me if he drops off again, because I'm wondering maybe it's my computer doing this. You'll have to tell me. All right, we'll all
could be if
say
a lot of
for each other. We'll look out for each other.
Could be if a lot of people are using the Wi-Fi on your end, Jackson.
Yes,
it could be that
yeah, they are. They are. There are people. A lot of people using the Wi-Fi right now. Because there's a big old game. Can't they just watch the game? Do they have to watch it on their phones? Just go hang out with your friends.
Yeah. Oh well. Oh, you expect people not to use their stupid phones for everything except as a phone anymore?
Do what?
That you expect them to use their phones for anything other than not as a phone now?
Oh, ha ha ha. You know, they do also have smart TV. I've been told. So, so there's that.
I'm just pissed off I can't afford to have CBS on demand or whatever new thing, because that's where the new Star Trek is, and I'm annoyed that I'm not going to be able to see it.
Uh-oh. Hey, I just got a message.
Yes.
All right. We'll have to look at later.
From our friend in Japan.
Heard about playing through my CDs?
Jackson? Jackson?
You got it?
Hello? From our friend in Japan?
No, I think he was talking about one of the one that I could never figure out. I didn't do any search on it because I couldn't figure out how to spell it. So I realized that would take more time to try to figure out what it was they were referring to, the acetomydes or whatever.
I think we've might have lost Jackson
we
again.
might have lost him. Well, hold on here. We'll just wing it until we find out whether or not he pops back into the room. But yeah, a lot of the bacterial names are oddly spelled because they're with all the Greek crap. and it's sometimes hard to figure out phonetically what it is. So unless you can actually see it spelled out, if you try to do a search on it, you might bog down and go off on complete tangents. Sometimes they pop up fairly straightforwardly, but it's always a mess. So that one I avoided. I was tempted to look to see if I could find some material on some of the taxa names in that, but there he is. Today.
Now we have two Jacksons.
Okay.
Yeah, there's two Jackson. Yeah, we can hear you, and there's another you. There's the you, and then there's the picture of you, which apparently is like a fossil that refuses to go away.
That's really bizarre.
That's popped up occasionally on Google Hangouts before, and
there
it's
we
always
go. Got rid of it.
Puzzled.
Are you on two separate devices, Jackson?
Nope. No, I got rid of it. There it went.
Okay.
Actually, now it's his evil twin. You see that the pod person finally hatched, and it's now no longer the Jackson that we knew. It's actually the alternate Jackson.
You guys sound just fine now. Okay. Gosh,
okay.
actually disconnected me from the internet briefly, but you sound perfectly fine now. Okay. But RJ, yeah, Planktomycetes. My microbiology professor told us about that one. I think it's really crazy.
Well, I'm going to take the horrible step of opening up my references.
It's a prokaryote that has a nuclear envelope. Yeah.
See if I can manage to open the bloody thing up, because I live and die by my reference base. All during the thing with PZ, when subject matters were coming up, I would bounce back and forth between doing a Google search, like the inside-outside cell. I just Googled it, brought up the name of the people doing the work, and I go, oh, okay, I could search that out. And then I switched over to my bibliography. So if you will be so kind as to type into the group chat the taxa thing that you're referring to, I'll see what I can come up with here in my magic data set. There we go. Oh, Planktomyces. Oh, okay. There we go.
That's really weird.
See, I don't necessarily put the whole word in because it might have variations. And I got 7 results. Okay. There's a brand new paper determining the bacterial cell biology of Planktomycetes from Nature Communications, Bodecker. In fact, I think I may have sent you that one because we had this conversation earlier. A 2011 paper, first in Sagolenko, Beyond the Bacterium, Planktomycetes Challenge Our Concepts of Microbial Structure and Function. Also Nature Reviews Microbiology, so that's upper level stuff.
Yeah.
Then older work, they just did the genome sequencing of it back in 2003. That was a PNAS paper. And then Jenkins and first in that, Gene Discovery, Cell Division. That's from 2002, so that's really older. 2012, Jogler et al. On Journal of Bacteriology. Identification of proteins likely to be involved in morphogenesis, cell division, and signal transduction. So obviously it's an interesting little critter. Small number of researchers on it because a lot of the same names keep on popping up. Cell compartmentalization of the bacteria, that's Sagolenko, PLOS1 thing. And then there's a 2010 paper on the compartmentalized bacteria of the Planktomyces, Veromicrobia, Chlamydia, superphylum have membrane coat-like proteins. So what I would recommend you do, Buckaroo, is to always have just download my bibliography and make use of it, because I'm sure if you open up the PDF, you can do text search and have that as just kind of a little backup thing that you can draw on, because you can pick my brain that way just as easily. And you might find papers in there that are a surprise that you might not have known otherwise. Yeah. Because it's, and then not only that, you'll see in that Santarella, for example, that did the 2010 paper, then immediately you've got the other people that have done work. So then right next door to that is a 2013 paper that they did on 3-dimensional reconstruction of bacteria with a complex endomembrane system. So that's a follow-up of the 2010 stuff. And by plunking everything together that way, or by hunting around to find out by the individual authors' names or whatever, you can build up a whole network of what they've been doing or not. The other thing that I miss, it's not as common as it was, unfortunately. Probably with your systems, you can probably do it in the college environment. But when you look up the abstract of a paper in the HTML format, there will be a listing at the bottom of PNAS in particular that tells who cited it since within the system. Highline, I think it's called. And that you can really track down subsequent work in a hurry. And the older the paper is, that can give you a clue. If nobody's cited it in 5 or 10 years, woo, that's not gone anywhere. You can get an instant measure of how common something is. If you discover that it's got like 4 pages of people citing it, then that means that one's got legs. So you can use a lot of heuristics to kind of get the measure of where people are in fields and what things are developed. Obviously, really, really new stuff like this new Bell-Baum hypothesis on the inside out. That stuff, they'll just have to wait for it for the dust to settle.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, while we were talking about microbes, I brought up Yersinia, who is responsible for the Yersinia pestis, the Black Death. Yeah, and so there's one species of it that has all the genes for making flagella or a flagellum, but it has no flagellum.
That is interesting. I wonder if I've got the thing on. I'm just doing a little search on here.
There's because it's
I do
have the page for that one is I have it. Don't I? Yes, I do. I do have it. Okay, I'll send it in the. It's titled "A Rationale for Repression and/or Loss of Motility by Pathogenic Yersinia in the Mammalian Host." So I'll send that right here. There you go.
Yeah. Okay.
And so it's very interesting because it's like tooth enamel genes in xenarthrans. Why do they have it if they don't use it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Another little poke in the eye of.
I love data.
Another little poke in the eye of intelligent design. So.
Oh, dear boy! There's a sudden immediate flag on that one because of the author.
Who is it?
Scott Minnick. He's an intelligent design guy.
On that Yersinia paper?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So be wary. There's ulterior motive there.
I don't know. It seems Minnick, huh? It seems.
Yeah. See, he's a flagellum researcher, and bing, bing, bing. Yeah, I didn't have that in there. Isn't that sweet? Yes, that's interesting because he must not even be citing at his own work. But that would immediately put a flag up around that. It's not that it's going to be invalid work. It just is. Yeah, you want to watch out carefully about it.
Maybe he's another Kurt Wise.
No. He's equivocal in all of the testimony and stuff. He's been very vague about what exactly he thinks. And so it's kind of tough to kind of pile into him, but that's where the names pop up. The same way Michael Denton, any of the work that he's been doing, or the stuff involving Axe and Gouger and Sanford, who's a creationist, and that. So the fact that it's perfectly possible for people who are non-evolutionists to do perfectly fine work. I mean, Mark Tolman, the microbiologist, does perfectly fine work within his niche, but he's also a creationist. It's not an instantaneous disqualifier, but at the very least, it's a little flag, boop, because you're going to watch and see what's in it and see how it's used. It could be very narrow technical work, and this would be an example. It very, very well be the circumstance that his own work is actually implying evolutionary stuff that's literally under his own nose, but he can't quite follow up on it in his own context. Now that's very interesting. Now I am now intrigued.
We were talking about
it's so old. It's 7 years old.
Oh, we were talking about we had a whole lecture on motility in microbes, and so it was all about different types of flagella and all that jazz. And at the very end of the lecture, she told us, or my professor told us, some people seem to think that the flagella could not have come about through evolution. Well, that's wrong. And then he gave us a little paragraph to read on it, on the potential developmental pathway of the flagellum. And so I just thought it was kind of funny.
Wrote a paper has been cited in Signature in the Cell, which I've got downstairs, so I could theoretically check that out in future. But somebody has cited it more recently, mutagenic analysis of the Clostridium difficile flagellar proteins and their contribution to virulence in hamsters. And that's from Dingle, Mulvey, and Armstrong. That's from 2011. So the stuff is obviously technically competent and is being used by other people. Whether or not it's actually helping intelligent design or not, or anything else, we'll see. Yes, very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah. I think it was very interesting. So, Peter, is there anything you think I should have asked Dr. Myers, or we should have talked about?
As a layman, I have something that I would like to know, and that was what. And now I forgot his name. The guy who jumped in.
Oh, Nesslig?
Yeah. Can you explain a little bit in layman's terms what that was all about? Because that was something that went completely over my head.
So the normal, or I say the generally accepted hypothesis of endosymbiosis, you know how all of our cells have, or eukaryotic cells have mitochondria in them. Most of them do, and then plants
have chloroplasts.
And yeah, plants have chloroplasts. Of course, there's also secondary endosymbiosis events like peroxisomes, I think, and things like that.
And tertiary to boot. It gets complicated.
Oh yeah. So basically, endosymbiosis is the process by which the cell takes in these organelles and adapts them to different purposes. The mitochondria is related to this, or it's an alpha proteobacterium, if I remember correctly. It's related to the Rickettsia bacteria.
Well, there's actually still a bit of a debate as to which one is the closest to the ancestor of the mitochondria. The cyanobacteria, that's no doubt. Everybody agrees that that's
definitely
the
chloroplast.
But it's still kind of a thing. And because you're dealing with something that happened billions of years ago, and the two potential candidate groups each have kind of features, so it depends on which camp you look at. And it could be either one, or here's the fun part, what if the endosymbiont itself, its lineage is extinct? That it's only the cousins that have survived. We have no way of knowing because you don't have bacterial things preserved as fossils per se. They only have just the gross thing. So all of that origin stuff is, I think that the example you're probably taught in the schools is probably the dominant position and probably the right one. But always put that little caveat back there. If the actual group could be something that's gone extinct.
Yeah, that's true. So what he was talking about, what we usually think of with endosymbiosis is a larger cell, a prokaryote, when they had no nucleus, would have taken in the protomitochondria, the protomitochondrial prokaryote. So basically took it in through this process called phagocytosis. And
you do remember that I'm a layman, right?
Okay, essentially, it's a bad case of indigestion. The process of a cell eating another cell can kind of fall apart. And an endosymbiotic process is one where the thing remains a functioning component while still inside instead of getting digested. And then in the tug of war between its membranes and genes and stuff, they kind of settle down to a deadly little dance. And in the case of mitochondria, which is really interesting, far more so than plastids in plants, is that the mitochondria retain their full DNA, although it's gotten trimmed down to where they gradually leaned up in these different mitochondrial lineages, discarding systems they don't need because the parasite, the host cell, has the business end. But they still retain, particularly in relation to cell death, mitochondria keep their little mitts on that very, very tightly. And that's one of the guiding systems of multicellular organisms is that selective cell death stuff that the mitochondria are the main divides to. So this is really hot stuff, deep core biological processes. So it's really fascinating. But yeah, just basically think of it as a bad case of indigestion. That's endosymbiosis.
Yeah. So that process, what Nesslig was referring to, the sort of flip on it is that generally what we think of with endosymbiosis is that the prokaryote was the outside, and it took the proto-mitochondria in. What the inside-out hypothesis says is that the original Archaean prokaryote was something like the nucleus of our modern cells, but it grew outward and grew around the proto-mitochondria. And so
Okay.
And so it's instead of taking it in, it grew around it.
So that's a new hypothesis that people are working on, or is it
Yeah,
something?
the inside-out
and
hypothesis
very new.
is what Nestlig was referring to. That's the new hypothesis of endosymbiosis.
And what was fascinating about it, it's so new that P.Z. Myers didn't know about it.
Yeah, because it's kind of interesting because the prokaryote had to create a double membrane essentially, which was kind of intriguing. So that's what he was kind of thinking about at the end.
Yeah, what it'll do, it'll stir up the pot, and people will be thinking more and more about what the system was before the endosymbiosis, and whether or not it might turn out to be the case, whether they're going to realize that the ancestral system is one that we don't see in existing organisms anymore. It's a lineage that's died out, and the only survivor is the stuff that we see inside of the mitochondria. That could produce a big taxonomical upset, and then it might also be opening up more and more thinking as to what was going on farther back towards Luca, where you're trying to figure out how many other players are in play. I've always felt that on origins or bust issues, you've got a whole slew of potential players that we don't have available now because they've all gotten amalgamated.
Yeah, but it's also, and you're right, RJ, it's also difficult to tell kind of who's related to who at that level, which is why there's a debate between the three-domain hypothesis and the eocyte hypothesis. Three domains is generally what you're taught. If you go to school, that's what they're going to teach you. They're going to say there are bacteria, there are archaeans, and there are eukaryotes. And it's just three big branches on the tree.
It pops into anti-evolutionism because anti-evolutionists look at this and say, because of lateral gene transfer and all of that in the formation of complex organisms, that therefore the tree of life is wrong. Darwin's disproved because of all of this stuff going on. And no, it's not. So if you have a good sense about what it means in that bacterial sea of bacteria that tend to stay very stable, but they do it by constantly changing and shuffling information back and forth while remaining kind of the same, that process is just meant that the usual means of tree drawing, where you have nice, neat lineages that get separate on separate branches, don't apply in the shrub that's all entangled. And still is entangled at the bacterial level. We know that endosymbiotic processes haven't stopped, and they're probably happening at about the same rate that they have been through the entire history of life.
Yeah, it's very intriguing stuff. But what there was an idea, Peter, there is an idea called the eocyte hypothesis that says there are these two groups of archaeans that are probably more closely related to us than they are to other archaeans, called DPAN and TAC. It stands for these very long names like Thaumarchaeota, Enigmarchaeota, etc. It's these really long names. So DPAN and TAC, they think we're more closely related to us. If you agree with the eocyte hypothesis, then there's also this group called Loki Archaeota, which is even more closely related to eukaryotes because they have genes necessary for endosymbiosis to occur, like the ESCRT genes, which allow the type of phagocytosis necessary for endosymbiosis to occur. And so it's a lot of difficult stuff down there at the base of the tree.
Yeah, the eocyte hypothesis was only put forward in 2008 by John Archibald. And the paper is in PNAS. I'll put up a thing so you can see a link to that, and then plus, out of my own curiosity, I'm interested to see how much work has been done since on it.
I feel like it might be true. I think it might be true.
What is often the case in science is one where two competing sides are at loggerheads, and it turns out both of them are right and both of them are wrong. And
yeah, I mean the most of the archaeans are definitely related to each other. Most of them are.
Yeah, this
are
is not listing the citations on this, but anyway, I'll put the link up for anybody that wants to poke around. And 2008 is not that long ago.
Yeah, yeah. But I don't know. It just, I don't know. It seems too neat almost, doesn't it? With only 3 branches. Seems almost too
well,
neat.
especially when you think about all the time frame that's involved. You know, I mean, bacteria. How much fun and games can they be going through over billions of years? That's something that you really kind of pay attention to. In the same way that one of the views, in fact, I'll be probably discussing this on the biogenesis thing for the next evolution hour. One of the ideas that DNA may have started out as a hitchhiking parasite to an RNA organism. And so the thing that we're used to now as the settled version might have been quite a little tug of war going on. And then the other big uncertainty question, was the original living system an RNA or something else? Because there are other nucleic acid forms that do interesting stuff. I don't think any of them has been quite as neatly autocatalytic as RNA, but there's a bunch of stuff. And if I think there's tiny little fragments of things, like one of the things that I began to do research on, because I didn't know whether or not it meant something, is could you have different architectures for systems? We know the basic format is dual strand DNA, but we know that not only single strand DNA pops up in some biological context, but triple DNA, where a third ring is formed along the
That's like
thing.
viruses, isn't it?
Well, it's actually pops up in a lot of odd contexts, and I keep on taking notice. And the same thing, the other part is that the RNA and duplex RNA, and so how much of that pops up in unusual little contexts. And it's all potential clues. Another little minor issue that I've kept in the back of my head is the Earth spun much faster in those days. And did it have a stronger magnetic field? And might some biological processes that are affected by magnetic fields be accentuated in the early stages of life precisely because they've got that factor? So I've been kind of accumulating technical literature relating to curious little biology that happens in a magnetic field and how magnetism can affect some of these things.
Yeah, there are archaeans that are magnetic, or they move with the Earth's magnetic field. Yeah. And
so once you get a set of circumstances, what I would call the training wheel life form, that's the first replicator. And I put a note in that Myers is quite right to focus in on metabolism, because I'm very much in favor of Wallace Arthur's argument that
metabolism first.
Metabolism first, yeah. He makes a very good circumstantial argument, because any replicator, the moment it starts replicating, it's going to eat itself out of house and home. And if you don't have a constant supply of metabolites, it's going to go boop, extinct. And that may have happened more than once. That's the fun little uncertainty about how many failed experiments or the little system was just getting going, and then another asteroid comes in and vaporizes the Earth's oceans and obliterates stuff, and then has to start all over again. We don't know.
Well, heck, I mean, life came about probably for good reason during late heavy bombardment, so it might have just sprung into existence 2 or 3 different times.
Yeah. In fact, it occurs so quickly. The latest circumstantial evidence is that for all practical purposes, as soon as the bombardment got down to the point where it's not vaporizing the oceans, life is there. Yeah. And you're starting to see the biomarkers of it, that the isotope signatures start showing up and all that, even before you actually have the first fossils that show up by about 3.8 billion years. But even at that, you may have a time frame that's hundreds of millions of years long, but still, that's an eye blink. And when you're looking at it from 4 billion years later, you know, it's all that stuff going on there down there in the early part of it. But we can't ever assume that the initial players in the system are that much like the finished versions that we see in Luca. Luca is presumably the result of an awful lot of other fun stuff going on. And it's not an easy problem to deal with. Fascinating one, though.
Yeah. Oh, RJ, what did you think of the or also Peter, what did you guys think of that website I showed you, the was it Evo Genio?
Oh, the one where you could go back and to see how far related you are from
it's a fun graphic
and plants.
Yeah. What do you guys think of it?
I thought it was amazing.
I did a few spot things just to look and see what the numbers came up with to felt did they feel intuitively correct, and they all looked about right. So I'm going, yeah, okay, there we go. I of course want more fossils. I want to see the fossils. I want to look at those because so much of the lineages are extinct. So they're not going to show up as a node at the living animal form, although that's good enough on its own. But still, it tends to make us forget how many lineages didn't make it to now.
Yeah, but don't keep in mind, James, the work that goes into making a website.
Oh yes,
like
it's
this,
a fabulous. This would have been
for us.
It's
quite easy to say we want this and we want that, but to put it into a website and to make it all available just by a simple mouse click is something that's incredible.
Yeah, and in principle, that same kind of material is going to be constantly expanded, and so they're going to add on yet more interactivity and yet more sidebars to where you can look up more and more and more and more and more about all the information. So yeah, what you're seeing with that site is only the tiny sliver, the tip of the iceberg, in terms of not only what the data set are, but how diligent people with talent and visual panache create a system that's user-friendly so people can get at all that information, and it's only going to be upwards from here. I'm delighted with it.
Yeah, I thought it was.
I think the website. I think the website that Aaron Ross working on is going to be even better. But
yeah, I really love the pictures. I think it's very important to try to explain to people something that's very difficult to explain is what does the common ancestor look like?
Mm-hmm.
What is a common ancestor between us and chimps look like? What does a common ancestor between us and birds look like? Because it's just people. A lot of people aren't going to even attempt to visualize these things, and so they need a reference like Evo Geneo, which I will actually post in the. I'll post over here in the.
See, imagine the power when you have all of that fossil data and extinct forms integrated into the network, because there's a huge amount of taxonomy that's been done on extinct formats. And imagine a circumstance where anything that is an actual fossil representation would be like a little glowing red dot or something. And people can start poking around in that monster data set and start tracing lineages through time and realize that at every stage, no matter where they look, they've got something which is not quite something else, and it came from something that was less like something else and more like something else over there, and everything starts connecting up into one lineage after another, and they have a sense of the giganticness of it and the blatant evolutionariness of it, because you're not finding things really poking up instantly out of nowhere. They come from a long line of natural branching lineages, and that with the visuality becomes much harder to avoid.
Yeah. The one maybe gripe I have with this this Tree of Life thing is our common ancestor with Nidarians. For a common ancestor with Nidarians, it has a picture of a ctenophore, which I saw and I kind of thought, probably not.
Yeah, well, remember, the farther back they go, the more and more they're going to have to kind of jump off the gangplank.
Well, yeah, but I mean, the picture is it's a comb jelly, and I just kind of laughed and thought, oh, okay.
Why did they pick that? Yes. And so it's a work in progress, and the data stream is going to be moving really fast, and so I don't envy the huge effort that people working out such a system would have to come up with something that can kind of keep up with the literature. They would need to have quite a big team of people because, look how stuff pops up that you don't necessarily know is there.
Yeah.
If it's outside of your discipline.
Yeah, it's there's just so much biology stuff to keep track of. And when I ask my professors, about these things, like I asked my professor about I asked my geology professor about Sicker Point the other day, and he said, "What are you talking about?"
Oh, yeah, you mentioned that in the chat. That does gobsmack me. That's quite peculiar.
I explained to him what it is, and he said, when I explained, oh, it's Devonian strata atop basal conglomerates atop Silurian strata, he said, oh, yeah.
It's something they remembered way back in the geology course. So not have to bother too much about it. Yeah.
Back in the day, yeah. Yeah, I just, yeah, I was a little shocked that he said that. And so, but when he did realize, he was like, oh yeah, it's like that. Because we were talking about
the reason why it's a relevant thing to bring up is we know that if you have a teacher that knows that context, and you're going to be able to have a better defense if they bump into a creationist student, or for that matter, the classes that bump into other contexts as well. If it's all been kind of brought up, it's not necessarily front burner, but it's made aware of as an apologetic tool more effectively, because we know it's going to come up at one area or another, and it's a useful little symbolic piece of information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that can be used to throw at people.
Yeah, he does, as I told you, he dumps a lot on the flat earthers and the creationists, which I think is kind of funny. One of the really interesting things was the alternation between the poles, the geomagnetic pole reversals. I didn't realize there were so many just in the Cenozoic.
I think the rough estimate is it's like every 750,000 years or maybe more. It can occur that frequently. I think the last one was about 700,000 years ago, if memory serves me.
It's so fast, and it makes you wonder if I think it'd be a good question to ask creationists. Hey, if this, we can see evidently this occurs, you just go closer and closer to what is it? The giant crevice in the Atlantic. What is it? Or it's not a fault, is it? Is that what it's called?
Well, not in the Atlantic. There's a mid-Atlantic ridge. It's more of a bump up rather than a bump down. You got things like the Marianas Trench and things like that.
No, I know it's not the Marianas. I used to live by the Marianas. But anyways, it's like as you get closer to it, you can see the reversals. It's like you keep going, oh, it's a reversal here, go a little bit farther, oh, another reversal here. And so you have to ask them, okay, we can evidently see that these rocks have been reversing in their polarity over the years. How has that been occurring under a flood chronology?
Yeah, how fast was all of this?
Wait, what?
Yeah,
everyone's drunk.
Everyone's. Are you drunk again?
No.
No. Hi, Karis.
No. Hi.
How are you today, Karis?
Slightly tipsy, but mostly just tired.
Oh, that's all right.
How are you?
Oh, peachy. Subduction zone? Is that what I'm talking about?
Well, those do occur, but the information on in the Atlantic was the parallel bands along the mid-Atlantic ridge. What you had was this mountain range that had been discovered back in the 1920s, in fact, and one of the lady geologists, immediately spotted that this would have something to do with continental drift, but nobody paid any attention to her. But when they finally started doing the magnetic mapping in the 1960s and 70s, you would see this bit where the polarities were like barcodes on either side, and there were parallel bands. So the same polarity shift was occurring on the left side and the right side because the land had been pushed apart. And so you had these nice, neat parallel bands, and they go, oh, now we can see that the land is moving apart, and over time you're getting a polarity shift, and the same one is occurring on either side because they're older rocks as far as you go farther and farther out, and the stuff that's the newest is right on the edge of the ridge. So yeah, and it flipped everyone immediately to plate tectonics. It was just like almost overnight.
So about that, what you just mentioned, the polarity bands, I think you said they were called. I know nothing about this. I've never heard about it. And it's probably because Answers in Genesis never mentions it, and I'm kind of suspicious as to why. So if there's a way that you guys could possibly get this information into layman's terms, and
I'll be making a video on it next or soon.
Yeah, but
yeah,
what
the
you
short
do,
form is
just,
why does a planet have a magnetic field at all? It's believed, and of course it's difficult because we can't get in our little submarine and go down to the center of the Earth to look. So it's very,
Right.
very difficult. But the main thing is that there's a liquid metal core that's composed of a variety of different stuff,
Yeah.
and what it's composed of will affect how the fields go. But what the thing is that periodically, as it goes along, it will suddenly shift polarity. That it will alternate between the North Pole being on the north and the south, and then it reverses. And it's relatively rapid. I mean, I think it only takes a few hundred years or so for you to go through a whole shift. And it means that life must have been pretty used to this, because during the shutdown, your cosmic rays and radiation are being poured in much more directly. And that wasn't a problem in the early times when everything was in the oceans, but stuff on land presumably has to have a certain amount of adaptive capability to handle all of that.
So this might be where Mel could come in handy, because she's an educator for just regular people on this type of thing. And she could probably put this into very easily digestible sound bites for just the regular old Joe.
Yeah, we're really in one of the things that worries some people is that we're kind of overdue for a magnetic reversal. And the problem is that during a magnetic reversal, you have this stand the chance of frying a lot of our electronic systems and our electric grid and our communication systems during the point when we are suddenly being bathed in, you don't want to go outside during the ultraviolet thing because there's way too much of it coming down because it no longer has the magnetic field to keep charged particles. Boy, you're going to have a lot of pretty auroras after a geomagnetic, during a reversal until it reconfigures. And then if you've stayed hunkered down in your bunker long enough and come out with your magnetically hardened computer systems to reboot, you'll find your compass now points to the south magnetic pole, which is now the north magnetic pole. And where it exactly pops up is another question. I mean, from a scientific end, geologists would sell their grandmother to be able to actually experience one of these things, because it would be intriguing to know, is it coming out at exactly the same spot but at the opposite pole, or does the pole actually reconfigure and it's not quite where it was before? We don't know.
You would not want to buy my grandmother.
But
oh, okay. Well, we'll have a selection as to which grandmother we want to sell.
I would like.
Does that make it a little clearer, Charis?
What's
Charis?
that?
I mispronounced your name.
Charis,
yeah,
it's okay.
I will be making a video on old Earth geology. I've had that planned for a few weeks, and so that will be one of the topics I cover in it. But yeah, I would really be interested to know what the creationist interpretation of these magnetic pole reversals is, since a lot of them say, like Kent Hovind, say that our poles, our magnetic field is weakening, and then once it weakens, it'll be the apocalypse essentially, which it won't, because we have like a second field, isn't it? Which will also protect us from.
Well, their big thing right now is that we're getting close to the end times, and they're looking for New World Order, global conspiracy, trying to make natural phenomena into natural phenomena instead of supernatural phenomena. They're saying that we're just trying to hide the fact that it's God doing all these signs and wonders to speak to us, when he could just pop his head down and say, "Hey, yo, I'm here."
Andrew Snelling has been their point man. He's had a couple papers over the years, and his most recent one apparently is 2015. More evidence of rapid geomagnetic reversals confirms a young Earth. So apparently they want to think that all the geomagnetic reversaling is going on like all at once.
I'm stealing that word. I'm stealing that word.
You're making a big mistake, James, because there's no they. They're all individuals. And Kent Hovind would disagree with you on this one, because he would say the exact opposite, that Earth magnetism has always been the same, and
by
there's
they I meant AIG, Answers in Genesis. Yeah, I don't assume outside of that boundary. Yeah, you're quite right on that one. Well, Kent Hovind lives in a planet all by himself, so that's he kind of
that one.
Parasitically, largely copies stuff he read years ago and basically is frozen in that bit. Snelling at least tries to kind of keep up, but Kent is in a different bunch. Yeah. But now I see that I have so little on the geomagnetic thing from a creationist point of view that now my curiosity is piqued.
Because there is so little, and I think I know why. Because it is damning to that worldview.
Well, the same thing with interbedded volcanic ash. Snelling is, again, the only one that I know of that ever kind of noticed the fact that there was interbedded volcanic ash and thought there must be more than one flood, which didn't get him very far, and apparently got squashed on that, and he hasn't really played that card since. There's these little teeny little fiddly bit data stuff in geology that they kind of roll under the rug.
What the trick would be when it comes to continental drift, I'm sorry, Jackson, the way AIG tells it is that it was a sudden catastrophic splitting of the continent that we know as Pangea. Because
which
during
is
the flood,
also funny.
Right, they say
depending upon who you read.
Right. But they say during the flood, the wells of the deep, sprung forth, and part of that springing forth of water from the wells of the deep, wherever they originated, just catastrophically forced the continent apart into different pieces, and they drifted during the flood. So I think one challenge will be getting these people to understand that this was a process that happened over a much longer period of time than the 300 days or whatever that the Earth was allegedly flooded.
Yeah, and worse, there are a whole bunch of very complex crystal forms that cannot be formed quickly or cannot be formed except at depth under extreme pressures. And that the kinds of stuff that as a geologist, Snelling has got to know about some of this stuff, but you're going to, as I'm going to be eventually, if I can live long enough, investigating these side issues, finding out the extent to which his brain just shuts down on these things because he can't think about it, because to think about it would mean he'd have to reject the dogma. And then most of them don't even bother trying.
Well, that's because it's actually, honestly, very scary in a very visceral sort of way. They really do believe hell is real. And if they go against the Bible and accuse God of being a liar, they really will suspect that they might not be saved and might be therefore destined to a literal hell. So when it comes to crossing the Bible, they're going to reel back from that out of sheer panic, if nothing else. It's a literal thing for them.
Yeah, our little Tortugan minds at work.
Yeah.
I mean, having been there, I mean, it's very, very real for them.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy stuff, or not really crazy. I mean, it's something.
Well, it's
I'm still trying to get,
because it keeps them captive.
Yeah, it is very scary. I'm trying to get Tony in right now. He's having some difficulties. He says I sent him the link, but it says the Google Hangout. He says the Google Hangout app isn't working for him. So
this is live. Dang it, Jackson.
Of course this is live. What did you think?
Wait, we've been live this whole time?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, we're alive. Either that or we're a giant simulation in the Matrix.
Actually, I kind of lean towards that.
People in the chat are talking about your avatar, Karis.
Oh, crap. There are people in the chat. I forgot about chat.
You're making people hungry.
Oh, well, that makes a bunch of us, I guess, because now I'm hungry.
Yeah, I know. Every time I see that hamburger, I'm going, oh, boy, does it have onions? Oh, yeah. And I know, no, just stop looking at it because it's only going to be a tease.
Just imagine what my next one will be when I change it.
Oh, my. It'll be like a large Subway sandwich next time, maybe. I don't know.
Sure, we'll go with that.
Hey,
6-inch or 12-inch?
James. James.
Oh, the big pizza. Thank you again, Jackson, for sending that pizza. I got three meals out of that damn thing. That was delicious.
Oh my goodness.
Hey, Tony.
Hey.
Hello, can you hear us?
I can hear you. I was turning the TV off so I could actually talk to you guys without having an echo in the background.
Oh, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm actually having a little bit of trouble. Can I come back? I'm going to stay on the line, but can you give me a minute so I can get this locked down?
Oh yeah. Do your little swirly button and come back in.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Can I teach James for just a minute?
Yes,
While
Fino.
this is happening? James, how about my avatar now? What do you think, James?
I'm here now. Okay.
Oh, I always love Einstein in anything. You can't go wrong with Einstein.
Yeah, but I'm not Einstein at the moment.
Well, that doesn't matter.
You'll have to look at the screen to see my avatar.
It's a pretty moving picture in there.
Stick your tongue out. Stick your tongue out.
So,
my tongue doesn't work with this one. This one has.
No, it's a tomato. It's a tomato. The tomato is your tongue.
Yeah, but
guys are ridiculous.
I can't complain about that. Anything.
I can blow, but I can't stick my tongue out with this one.
I'm not going to comment.
Anyways, so
You need a pickle. You need a long gherkin or a pickle or something to act as the tongue.
We need a pickle to blow.
So this is spiraling out of control. Anyways, so Tony, welcome.
Hi.
Yeah. So what do you think of our
Good to be on your show. Fun gang. Like listening to you guys talk. You're funny. And yeah, Sheriff, your avatar does make me hungry. That's true.
Sorry about that.
Not bad at all.
So, did you catch my talk with PZ?
I didn't. I actually I was out doing something, came back in and found that I missed it. So that here I am. Okay. That's why. Well, so I was telling you, I didn't know if I had anything to contribute, but here I am.
It's all good. You know a lot of stuff about creationism too. So maybe you can answer my question. Have you seen anything about creationists talking about the geomagnetic pole reversals?
Funny you should say that. I covered that in one of my episodes, and I'm actually going to cover it in episode 2 this season. Not that I'm trying to plug my show or anything.
No, that's okay.
But yeah,
plugging things here.
Comes with the turf.
Anyway, I'd say that yeah, I've heard the argument quite a few times in a lot of different ways. But is there one specifically you wanted to talk about?
Oh, I was just wondering because we were talking about relative dating methods in my geology class, and I was just interested because the magnetic pole reversals have just occurred so many times over just the Cenozoic, the past 66 million years. It's like easily over 100 times it seems, at least from the diagram we were shown, and so it made me wonder how they could rationalize away the reversals if we're not seeing it at the speed that it's occurring in modern times.
Actually, I have seen that argument, so I guess I'm going to take the creationist side for this one. No, I won't be with that. Hovind presented an argument, and it's not just his. Also, what's his name? A hydroplate guy.
Oh, Walter Brown.
Both Walter Brown and Hovind, and apparently Hovind adheres to Walter Brown's theory. But what they claim is that the reason why we say there have been polar reversals in the past is because we just looked at the spots where we saw magnetism in the ocean, in the seafloor, and where it was too low, or where the magnetism was low. That meant we decided that, a reversal. He's claiming that it's just weaker magnetics. He doesn't realize that magnetites, he's never heard of magnetites, I guess.
Whoa.
But that's what his argument was. It's that now you're just randomly deciding that a certain level of magnetism is one direction, and then you know, anything below that is a different direction. And that's not it at all.
Russell Humphreys has a physical mechanism for reversals of the Earth's magnetic field during the flood. I'll put a little link into that.
That's very interesting.
I'll be adding some stuff to my data set here. It looks like between Humphreys and Sarfati and
Sarfati, I've come across him before.
They're basically the ones who venture in on it. Hovind may stick it in his lectures, but remember, most of his crap isn't available to view. To read, because he doesn't write crap all that much.
Right.
Yeah. I have to say, in the same vein, I have to say, I think one of the videos I found most interesting of yours, Tony, was the one about ringwoodite. That video interested me quite a lot.
Was that the one on ocean salinity? Or that was about not ocean salinity. That was the one on water caverns.
Yeah. I thought it was that was a very interesting video, because I'd never heard of ringwoodite. And so it's all very interesting to me.
Well, keeping with the title of the show, you know, this is where creationism did teach me real science. I had never heard of ringwoodite. I saw the claim presented to me by somebody. Well, this is a gotcha. See, just like we said, there are oceans of water under the earth. And I think it was actually Nephilim Free who first showed that to me. So I looked at it. I was like, oh, okay. And I looked at, and of course, when you look at the literature, you actually have to, you can't just rest on, well, whatever ringwoodite is. I had to look that up. And so, again, like I said, it's creationism that taught me real science again.
Yeah, I had a conversation with Nephilim Free. He was the first YouTube creationist I talked to, and it was just a private conversation we did like February of last year, I think. Looking too soon, but yeah, we just did a private conversation. Everything he argued was very circular. Just he had endlessly circular arguments.
I've been kicked off of his channel so many times that I can't really argue with him.
Well, you know, he didn't like facts, and that, you know, that's just, it happens among creationists. That's seems to be a common theme, as RJ well knows. But
my problem arguing with him is even when his source refutes him, because of course that's the easiest way to defeat a creationist is go to their sources, and when their sources say a different thing than they say, obviously they didn't read it, they just read the title, I guess. And Nephilim Free rarely article, or he just reads what he wants to.
Yeah, that's not at all surprising.
That's what I've noticed.
What was it? RJ, you called it pulling a something. What was it called?
Oh, that's pulling a Garrett Hardin. Yeah, Garrett Hardin was a recently died environmentalist who popped up on my scope. He was an evolutionist and that kind of political liberal. He came up with the tragedy of the commons, but he popped up on my scope because he had written a book back in the 70s where he was advocating liberalized abortion laws, which I'm perfectly in favor of. But in making his argument, he made the mistake of relying on a Czechoslovakian birth study that supposedly showed the deleterious effects of unwanted births in society. And he reprinted the whole bloody thing as an appendix to the book. And not one of the conclusions he was drawing from it was justified by the paper he had just cited. So it was a perfectly fabulous example of pulling a Garrett Hardin is going out of your way to call attention to material that blows your arguments to smithereens. And so when I see that with creationists, I go, yeah, they're pulling a Garrett Hardin.
And they do it quite a lot, because we were looking up some an answers to Genesis argument recently, and even if it doesn't, even if their sources don't destroy their argument, it certainly doesn't help their argument. The RJ and I were looking up this one because long story short, I was told by a woman that the average dinosaur size was that of a sheep. And so I did
That's
actually
what we were taught.
I did actually get around to reading the whole paper on that that they did, which was fairly arbitrary. And thanks to you, James, I understand now why there aren't any technical literature pieces on
because it's a meaningless question.
It's like asking, what is the average fish size? What is the average mammal size? Yeah.
They do have a reason for researching that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I get they have an ad hoc reason for...
Oh, yeah, they got to figure out on the ark how much space they got on that. But if anything is meaningful, if you were to encounter on average dinosaurs, it's much more the case that you're talking about something that's about the size of a Volkswagen or bigger.
Yeah.
And are usually often way bigger. But obviously, every little giant dinosaur starts out as a little itty bitty one, so they can kind of wriggle around that. I love the thing where Dwayne Gish was saying that you didn't need to have a full-grown brontosaurus on board the ark. It could be just a little baby, and it would fall into a stupor, so you wouldn't have to worry about feeding it during that. And I go, yeah, it falls into a stupor, kind of like Dwayne Gish's brain on creationism.
You know, while we're on that subject, have you guys noticed that even creationists use the word Gish Gallop?
Yes. I think Hovind doesn't like the phrase anymore because too many people have pointed out that he does it. So he says, I don't do it, you do it.
I am rubber, you are glue.
I've been in debates with creationists and often been told, well, you're going to Gish Gallop or don't Gish Gallop on me. I'm like, you're a creationist. That's supposed to be pejorative toward you.
Yeah, Kent Hovind is probably the super master of it. I don't think anybody can spew more misinformation at higher baud rate than Kent Hovind. The Gish was relatively slower. Plus, although Gish did debates, it wasn't his primary focus. He was a writer, and so he actually wrote books and all the rest. And that is a much slower motion train wreck than what you get into in the Kent Hovind bit. So if anything, Gish needs to be retired on that one. The main point about Gish, which is true of most creationists, is that Gish, if you would point out how he was wrong, he would nod his head and kind of concede that you had got him, and then he would go to the next lecture and repeat the same thing he had repeated before that he was caught on. And that was the nasty quality of him, that he wouldn't care about that. And so the extent to which you can document them doing that, that's going to be harder to pull off in the era of people with cell phones with video feeds and all that.
That is true. Yeah.
Yeah. Creationists definitely do it. There were two guys here at LSU who were for some ministry. I don't remember which one. And there was a younger guy and an older guy, and the younger guy kind of pulled me aside and started talking to me. And I guess I was getting the better of him because the older guy stepped in. Or I might have that backwards. I talked to one of them, and the other one stepped in after I started talking to him. I can't remember which one now. Actually, I think I was talking to the older one, then the younger one stepped in. So anyways, point being that it seemed like maybe they were in over their heads because they both had to jump in on the conversation with little old me. And so they were just running around with all these arguments. You know, there was just a whole list of things. I actually brought like a notepad with me, and I was just writing down as quickly as I could. All mutations are negative because there's no evidence for macroevolution. Therefore, evolution is false. Blah 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 blah. Just one thing after another after another.
Keep in mind their emotional investment in this. I mean, I said keep in mind their emotional investment in this while they're talking to you, because typically. Contrasted with us, they're going to have a much higher emotional stake in this argument. And you could kind of discuss that with them, because when it comes down to emotions, you're not going to win them over with logic. The emotions will kick in and cloud their vision, as they might say, to put in spiritual terms. But psychologically speaking, the logic isn't going to be usually what will win them over. Unfortunately.
It was what was funny about those guys. I'll toss it over to you, Tony. But what was funny about them is it turned out they were both the pastors of a church nearby, And so I took on both the pastors at once and came away, I think, victorious. So.
Yeah, I find that the pastors of the churches, science isn't usually their thing, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, I'm not saying anything bad about pastors, but science isn't most people's thing. Most people just want their phones to work, and so when you're repeating something in apologetics, and I have actually gotten a degree in apologetics, but we'll talk about that some other time. You're really going to you have to really have a wide net of knowledge. You can't specialize in science, because sometimes, just like Cheris was saying, you have to have the emotional arguments ready. You have to have everything. You're taking on more than one person really should chew. But that's what apologetics is, defending the faith.
Yeah, and it really, because the apologists who come around here, it was hard to say, a real tongue twister, who come around here, they are really interested in the pseudo-philosophic aspects of it a lot more than these scientific aspects. When they talk about science, they only ever talk about it as a it just seems like almost a waste of time to them, which is hilarious because they're out there with video cameras and stuff. Hey, where did that video camera come from? But anyways, like if they talk about evolution, they just use these stupid analogies or these rhyming phrases like "goo to the zoo to you."
Yeah, that's your Hovind style. Yeah, you won't find that typically in intelligent designers, but young Earth creationists want that easy bumper sticker approach.
Yeah, and so they won't ever actually address the arguments, because as soon as someone like me comes up to them and says, "Oh, so you want to talk about potential mechanisms of abiogenesis? Okay, let's discuss those." Then, of course, they break down because they don't know anything about it. The closest they've ever gotten to it is "goo to the zoo to you."
Mm-hmm.
Or
yeah, and of course, my favorite. I want to bring up the reptile mammal transition.
Yeah, I was talking to the head of this cult on Facebook, because we fight quite a lot, and I was explaining to him just the evidence that tetrapods are derived from Sarcopterygian fish. I was just explaining that to him, and the only thing he could come up with was, we have the same evidence, but we're interpreting it differently.
Yeah, that's why I want to have everybody able to respond to that by saying, "Oh no, you don't. You do not pay attention to the same data. You barely bump into 10% of the data." And I can be smug on that because I'm literally measuring it. I don't have to guess.
In this guy's case, he's not bumping into any technical data, not a single piece, because I will send it to him. He was arguing with me on the thermodynamics, which, another great video, I have to say, Tony. I never heard of complexity theory before.
Really?
No, I've heard of chaos theory, but not complexity theory.
Complexity from chaos theory. But one more note on that response to, we've got the same evidence, we're interpreting it differently. Mm-hmm. The other argument I use, although actually I can't say I used the response you just used, but the one I usually use is that may or may not be true, but our perspective is what predicted that fossil would be there. There's a reason why, so I'll go into the things that were predicted by evolutionary theory. And that's really, for me, that's the most compelling thing, but it may or may not be compelling to a creationist. You never know what their button is.
Well, that segues into the frauds that they point out in, say, the evolutionary model. And they'll point out this fraud or that fraud or something that was discovered to be wrong, how science is so often wrong. But what they don't stop and think about is, how did we discover that these were frauds or that there was a mistake? Well, it's by the same process that you're right now deriding.
Yeah, that's something, as James points out, they literally don't think about. They don't think about how we knew was a fraud, how we knew Piltdown Man or Nebraska Man was a fraud. They don't think about it. They stop at the, "Oh, it's a fraud. Ha ha ha, got you, evolution. We would never be fooled." We would never be fooled.
and also how relatively rare those sorts of things are. I mean, you could probably count all the major fossil frauds on one hand, but that's a drop in the bucket compared to the amount of paleontology work that's done. And the more you know about that, the more powerful the defensive line is. Another reason for bringing up the reptile-mammal transition. Cro-Magnathids are one of the most spectacular cases of a predicted fossil you could possibly imagine. Because
most of them don't know the extent to which fossils have been collected.
No, they don't. You're right.
They've seen models lined up in a museum, and they'll be under the impression that they're in a museum because they are so rare. And this is the impression that they come out with.
Oh yeah, you go in as someone who works in a museum. That's the specimens out front. Uh-oh, we lost Tony.
Oops.
The specimens out front are a teeny tiny fraction of all the specimens we have in the entirety of the museum. It blows me away how many specimens we have, most of which because I have to catalog a lot of them.
And they don't know this. They need to know this.
Yeah, but how are they going to know this if none of the bigger creationist sources are going to mention it
exactly.
at all?
Yeah, what you get is a daisy chain. Tony's back. What you
Hello,
get is a daisy chain of the vast majority of anti-evolutionists relying upon what other anti-evolutionists tell them about what the data stream is, and 95% fall into that category. So the fact that none of them are working paleontologists means they have no idea. One of the myths that gets popped up is the fossil graveyard myth, and I called attention to a bit of that in Dinomania. The fossil graveyards are really rare. They're not common at all. They stand out like a sore thumb compared to the vast majority of the fossil record. But creationists think that they're all over the place from the flood.
Tony? Can you hear us, Tony?
I'm having trouble with my phone. Give me a second. Sorry, guys.
It's okay, demons again. We've been getting it all day.
Yeah.
Can't Hovind.
Anyways, but yeah, you're right. It's as R and Ra pointed out, there is, or what a lot of times what creationists know about the fossil record is what's limited to the plastic toys you can get at the store. You know,
the what?
Is the plastic toys you get at the store. It's like that's really we got Triceratops, we got Ankylosaurus, and Brontosaurus. That's
those toys.
That's about it. And so it's just, and they don't
know. Hovind got very mad that they now have feathered dinosaurs in the toy stores.
Oh, what?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think it's no coincidence that I was
someone sent him a toy dinosaur with feathers, and so now he's very mad that even the toys have feathers now, because this is the conspiracy gone mad now. Having the toys, having dinosaurs with feathers, this is completely crazy.
Have some catnip.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah, about the only little quibble that pops up is that the latest material does suggest that the very large tyrannosaurs, that bunch, were not heavily feathered, if at all. So when you get to that size, you didn't really need to bother about it. But the smaller ones, no, they don't have to guess that they have feathers. They've got the physical fossils of them showing them with feathers.
Yeah, exactly.
Not only that, we've even got the transitional feathers that I was joking with the creationist online, where he had the terrible mistake of tossing an old Jonathan Sarfati argument from 2008 about birds and feathers. And I, of course, know all the source material behind there and pointing out how antiquated it was. And he said, your source, didn't discuss this, did he? That he's relying on really old material. Circumstance now where the transitional forms of how feathers evolved have been worked out, and there are actual examples trapped in amber of these transitional proto-feather things that are not found of the forms that are found on living birds, but they're ones that were predicted on developmental evolutionary grounds by Prum and Brush. That's another slam dunk.
Yeah, and Tetrapteryx, which I pointed out in one of my videos, I can't seem to remember. Oh, Pointing to Common Ancestry, if I remember correctly, was the name of the video. I pointed out that Microraptor was predicted in 1915 by William Beebe, thanks to a certain someone, and it wasn't found until 2003, and it matched the prediction that paleontologists had been expecting for about 100 years.
And it's also does a sneaky maneuver, because if anybody tries to bring up Archaeoraptor and fake fossils, the two fossils that were the pieces that made up Archaeoraptor, one of them was Microraptor. So that's actually an integrated bit that relates to pro-evolution material, and it's revealing how the anti-evolutionists kind of bypass the implications of Microraptor, which, for those of you who don't know, it's a dinosaur that's got feathers on both its front limbs and hind limbs.
Yeah,
so it's a multi-level glider. And it's reminding us how diversified the early experiments in flight were. It's not an ancestor of birds. It's showing that dinosaurs are taking it to flight in a bunch of different lineages, one of which ends up as the lineage that leads to the birds that we now know and eat for dinner.
Yeah, that reminds me of Trey the Explainer.
Dinner.
We never managed to get. What's wrong, Karis?
She's just thinking of dinner.
But Karis, what are you talking about? You got a burger.
Yeah, you got that burger, that delicious burger there. That, I'm salivating in here. I had just a little bit of chili and tamales today, and that was it.
But Trey the Explainer. That was a guy we tried, or we did try getting him to do an interview with him, because he made a video on ontogeny and development, and in it he says I hope you enjoy your fatty Menoraptoran or something like that, fatty theropod dinosaur. And so I thought that was very funny. Yeah,
the revolution on the data stream had just a few holdouts that they're still bloody holdouts. I mean, Alan Fiducia keeps digging in his heels on these things right down to the bitter end. So that's why I call him the Fred Hoyle of bird evolution in Slam Dunk. But once you reach the stage where they had now resolved even the bird digit issue through a frame shift experimentally, that was just the tail end of it. That was it. There's just no evidence that you can marshal other than for the dinosaur model.
Right. Yeah. All we needed was the just the frame shift thing, and then we're done. Even though you ask Fiducia or any of his guys, and they'll still say nope, still no evidence that birds are dinosaurs.
Yeah, this was hilarious, and I allude to it in the book because it's such a hilarious example.
Death by 1,000 cuts.
The Prum mentioned about the fact that how weird it was that for years, Fiducia had been insisting that these Coelurosaur dinosaurs just superficially resemble birds and that they had no connection whatsoever to birds. And then they started finding feathered Coelurosaurs in China, and so he turns 180 degrees, and he's now insisting the same animals, that they're now actually flightless birds that have only a coincidental resemblance to dinosaurs.
Yeah, I actually cover Fiducia in an episode coming up on birds.
Thank you.
Because before I forget, there was a species of mammal transitional that you mentioned.
Probanic.
What was that name again?
Oh, I'll type it out so you can see it. I'll type out Probanic.
The one RJ's referring to, Diarthrognathes
Diarthrognathes brumii. Basically, it was a double-jawed critter that, unlike bird evolution, where really nothing in the anatomy is really novel. I mean, it's basically a bipedal dinosaur with the bipedal feathered dinosaur. It's a bipedal feathered dinosaur with tail. It's a bipedal. There's remarkably little genuine innovation in birds, other than the fact they eventually start flying and that. But mammals have to do a really weird kabuki dance to get from the reptile jaw layout, which we start out with in our embryology, to the full bone. I'm going to be nasty here and turn my dang camera on. Where am I? Because I can use it easier, even though I'm going to kill bandwidth. That what happens is you've got the articular and the quadrate bone that are the standard reptile jaw hinges, and that's what we start out with in our mammal biology. But we have a squamosal, a different skull bone, and the giant dentary bone. And we're the only form of life that has one monster jawbone, nothing else. Well, when they started to discover these animals that had kind of an enlarged dentary bone and a kind of morphing skull, this was in the early 20th century, long after Darwin was dead, it kind of looked like maybe they might be the group that dinosaurs came, or the mammals evolved from, but they didn't know for sure. Well, Robert Broom in 1912, who's much more famously known for Australopithecine work in the 1920s than he is for the mammal stuff that he did earlier, but he looked through this and said, you know, there's only one way you're going to make this work from an evolutionary point of view. You've got to have the standard reptile jaw hinge form as usual, and then at some point the bones have got to morph around so that the squamosal bone and the quadrate are next to each other, and the dentary bone has developed a point where it's now connected to where the quadrate articular bone is. A new muscle hinge is formed so that both of them are running together and at the same time, and that eventually that becomes the dominant one and the other one becomes atrophied and it gets pulled up into the middle ear, as we know happens from developmental biology. So he predicted literally the skull morphs, the muscle attachments, and everything in a form of life that didn't exist. Nobody knew about these things. No living form has this layout. He was predicting it solely on evolutionary grounds. And so when this was discovered in the 1930s, it was named in his honor. So we would have to believe that the designer so loved Robert Broom and Charles Darwin that he deliberately creates exactly the form of life that's predicted on evolutionary grounds. That's...
Well, I don't think I'm going to take that angle, but I'm actually working on an episode on mammals right now. So
don't forget the reptile mammal transition. It's the slam dunk.
Well, that's the one. It's going to be the reptile mammal transition. Yeah, in just the research I've done so far, looks like even the earliest potential diapsids, or the earliest potential synapsids, apparently had a lot of amphibian characteristics in their spine. It was apparently that
they break off way before.
Yeah,
in fact, that's one of the reasons why cladistically the paleontologists don't call them reptiles. They don't like the reptile mammal transition term because the reptile group actually branched off later. And I call attention to that in Slam Dunk, where I point about how Robert Prothero and these others go conniption fit over it. And I go, yes, I know, but I'm not going to call it the synapsid reptile, the synapsid mammal tradition. I'm going to call it the reptile mammal transition because that's the common use. But I will have put in the caveats that explain why I use that terminology. But boy, it's just fabulous because unlike every other major transition, there's really no gaps in any of the sequence. It's all super microevolutionary. And in some respects now we've even gotten to the stage of paleo engineering. The teeth, for example, they've now retro-engineered about 100 million years worth of mammal teeth, including some that are only known from extinct forms of the reptile mammal transition. I think the T2 group, I call them in the book, that's one of the forms they were able to retro-engineer based on just tweaking the genes that they've been able to identify. So it's just a bulletproof case, and all anti-evolutionists on the subject. So every one of them is screwed up, as Jackson can point out as he's starting to read the book.
Yeah, I have to also point out that I made a video on early mammal evolution where I talk about the reptile mammal transition. And really interestingly, I got a whole lot of views on that video for some unknown reason. First, I don't understand why, but it went from my normal videos.
I was asking about that he says you need to check in to find out why that was the case. Yeah, I have no idea why anybody sees anything at all. I just like the RMT. Yeah, because it's such a killer app. It's got none of the problems that bird evolution or the Cambrian explosion or the origin of life, for heaven's sake, have. It's just a beauty. And plus it's us.
Karis, oh, never mind. I was about to say Karis needs to go. Bye, Karis.
She probably need to get some food there. Depending on her time zone, it could be quite late for her there.
But yeah, I don't understand what happened. I do need to look at the analytics for it, but my videos usually, it takes a while for them if they're going to get over 100 to get there. But this one went up to over 450. Kind of all of a sudden. I just kind of went through my, or I checked my channel one day because someone had left a message somewhere, and then I noticed, hey, that video is at over 300 views now, and then checked it like a day or two later. Oh, hey, it's at over 400 now. So I don't know what about it was so was so intriguing, or is so intriguing, I actually think I spoke really quickly in that video. For some reason, I still have yet to understand.
Well, I haven't shouted you out yet, so...
Do what?
I said I haven't shouted you out yet, so I don't know, but you might want to check some of those new people and just ask them where they found out about you.
Well, see, no one's leaving comments.
Really?
Yeah, that can be frustrating. I hate it when I see a thing and then discover that there's been no comments on it. At least I can get some feedback.
Yeah.
And I occasionally try to lure creationists into the tip website too to deal with stuff. That was what I did with the oh god, Tony something or other on Twitter. And boy, what an idiot that guy is.
Oh no. Oh, never mind. Tony.
Yeah. Well, the real Tony or something. I mean, he's got a different name. He puts his one of his real names, I guess, up on there. But boy, he's just like shooting fish in a barrel, because it's he's way over his head on this, and I'm not going to let him off the hook because I know more of the material than he does.
Oh yeah.
I
gotta apologize.
A question from the chat, because I think that's quite relevant at the moment. I've been listening, and I think I might be the least scientific person on here. People are having trouble understanding what you're talking about.
At which point?
Because most of the people who are listening will be lay people, and if you keep throwing around terms and Latin names, you'll get absolutely nowhere. You get nowhere to. That's why
you should put the question in to us so that we can address it.
I've been looking. I keep flipping back and forth between this and the chat, and I must have missed it.
Yeah, I'm not seeing the chat at all.
I think that every time that you have the possibility to use a common name, you should use the common name and not the Latin name, because what you want to do is, if you want to address creationists, at least, is put it in a way that they can actually grasp and they can relate to.
Oh, well, there'll be no way to give a common name for anything in the reptile-mammal transition because they're all extinct.
Also with the bones, we were talking about the squamosal, and I saw Karis typing in 50 different spellings of it. But
yeah, because
like
you all might know what you're talking about, but the layman has no clue.
We'll see.
Oh, that's where you just jump in and say, "Hey, jargon alert! Explain it," and hopefully we should be able to do that.
Well, guys, I think that this person has a pretty good point, actually. When I make my videos, one of the worst failures I can have, people don't understand what I'm talking about. I consider that a complete failure. So I do get where he's coming from. The average person really has no use to know what a temporal fenestra is.
Yeah. Yeah, it is an issue.
He's got a good point.
It is an issue of explaining things, and you're right. It's yeah, it can get very, very technical sometimes. I even get left behind myself sometimes, but we.
Yeah, well, I'm just throwing it in because if you want the video to be any help for any creationist to find facts, then at least you'll have to go down to their level. And it's not that these people are stupid, because they're not.
Right. Yeah.
It's just that they lack a lot of the education they should have had. So they won't be able to grasp what you're on about. And that's, I think, something you need to keep in mind.
Yeah, I try to make or use the common names if I can in the video, but also if I can't, I also try to leave the names that I mentioned in the comments, because that was what I did for pointing to common ancestry. I used a lot of names, and Peter, you and Tony or Tony Heckenslash from Twitter, and others were saying that I should put the names of those up so people can go see those, which I did. So yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
But it's just a lot of these areas with paleontology have a lot of technical names, and it can be rather difficult to.
Yeah, well, if you're going to use them, don't use a lot in a very short time.
Yeah.
Because people will just click away either the conversation or the video because it goes over their head. They have no way of following the conversation, have no clue what you're talking about. And I still think that we would be better off if we made videos they can actually understand and they can actually work with at some point. And that's why I like the videos that Mel puts out, a scientist Mel, because she makes it so that everyone can understand, and I think that's crucial.
I do think you, Tony. I think you also do a really good job of that in your videos.
Yeah, Tony does as well.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you've seen them. Yeah, it's a goal I have. I don't know if I achieve it every time. There's certain things that there's sometimes I'm limited by time, or sometimes I just don't want to go that much into detail to be able to really clarify things. But for the most part, that is my goal, to make sure it's understandable. I'm not a scientist for a living, so I'll gladly take on the job of science educator or science popularizer. And I think that's what people like us should be doing. Which, by the way, Jackson, you said you were cataloging specimens. Can I ask a personal thing about where you work?
Sure.
Are you a curator? What do you do?
Curator. I wish, although that would be too much work for me at this point. I think. I work at the LSU Museum of Zoology here in Baton Rouge. And I work in the Department of Mammalogy. I'm a student. I'm a sophomore right now. And so okay. I do what?
I know you are.
Yeah. So my freshman year, I was looking the first semester of my freshman year, I was looking into different research programs that I could get into for some work, and I had a TA, a teaching assistant, who taught my first lab class, and I asked him about it, what sort of work there's being done on campus, and he pointed me to a website where I could go look up different professors who were doing work. And so I found this guy I'm working for right now, Dr. Esselstyn, and interestingly, he actually named a species of shrew rat called Posidentomes, which has no molars. It's so that was very interesting. He goes to Indonesia. So yeah, so I do catalog. So part of my job there is cataloging specimens. We got a large shipment of specimens from Tulane. Tulane University orphaned up a large part of their mammal collection. And so they came to us. And so we have to integrate all of those specimens into our collection. What we do is we have a really, really, really big Excel sheet. And so I have the job of taking out the drawers and looking at the different chiropterans or murines or whatever it is in the drawer. And I look at their Tulane number and we put them into the catalog, and that's what we do. I just do a whole lot of that.
I wish I had known you a year ago when I was in New Orleans, Baton Rouge area. I would have stopped by and said hi or something. I mean, hopefully you wouldn't have thrown me out. But yeah,
I really
would have been nice.
I listen to during your on season. I listen to your videos while I do the specimen counting because it's very monotonous, and so I have to have something to listen to. And I enjoy your videos. I listen to a lot of Matt Dillahunty's videos also. Because he puts out quite a few of those.
He puts out some pretty solid content. It's pretty long. By the way, everybody else, I'm assuming, has a channel too?
Yep.
Yeah. Yes. RJ and Peter both have channels.
Okay. One of them is Slam Dunk, correct?
No,
well,
he's
actually, it's Evolution Hour at the moment. Evolution Slam Dunk is the book.
Oh, okay.
Reptile Mammal.
Evolution Hour. Okay, is that the name of the channel? Okay.
No. Evolution Hour. You can find links to it all. Just go to my website and you can find links to all of that there.
Tony, here's the link to RJ's channel. Right here.
And,
there you go. There's a link to RJ's channel. And
I got links to that, and you can find links to the books and everything else, and all the stuff that's free. Download it, use it. It's free.
Okay, I'll definitely check it out. You expect to see a subscription later.
And what I do is completely different.
Tabs. You can say hi.
Okay, no problem.
Tony, what I do is completely different. I just have talks with theists.
With whom?
With theists.
Oh.
With
okay.
Whatever I can get my hands on. I had one famous one, Kent Hovind, just like Jackson did.
Okay.
Yeah, mine was a bit of a mess.
No, it wasn't.
A little bit more than a bit. It was quite a lot of a mess.
No, it wasn't.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I still think you did a good job. You were at least able to stun him a couple of times. And he always runs away when he encounters something that he can't counter himself. So that's not a problem. Keeping him to stick to the topic at hand is difficult.
That is true. That's quite true.
Yeah, it's just the problem is he can spin so many mistruths at one time that it's very difficult. Aaron has said it was a 19-word sentence that had 19 things wrong with it. That Hovind said
he had a sentence with 19 words and there were 21 errors in it.
21. Okay, yeah.
Wow.
So
which you think it takes this sort of skill to be that wrong.
Well, he's done this for decades, so I think that he has perfected it to a T. That's beyond doubt.
Yeah,
he's good. He's very good as well at what he does.
Yeah, there's a popular, like his most popular one is when he's up against 3 professors from some college. I don't remember what that is. He's wearing like a velvet-ish colored jacket, and so he just starts out by saying, "I'm going to make a list of predictions that should be true if creationism is true." And then he just makes a list of like 30 odd observations that you just make. Mm-hmm. Not prediction. He didn't make a single prediction. He just makes like all these observations, many of which were wrong. There were some things that he said, like if God exists, then love should necessarily exist too, and this other stuff. And it was just they were disadvantaged because what he asks, he even asked me to do it. He said, "Ask your professors if they'd like to talk with me, but I get half the time." And I thought to myself, not one of my professors is going to care to talk to him. Not one of them.
And of course, if 3 professors accept, like the 3-in-1 talk, he wants to have half the time. So that leaves one half that the other 3 have to share, which to me isn't fair.
It's not good, and he can just talk circles around them because he's been saying the same lines for 20 plus years. Also, Heavy Hauler says Bill Ludlow versus Kent Hovind was a great one. Yes.
Yeah.
King Crocoduck also destroyed Kent Hovind. They both just destroyed Kent Hovind. It was
well. My assessment of Kent Hovind, he's not what he was. But he was, before he went to jail, he was possibly one of the best public speakers I'd ever seen, and very quick-witted. I think that now he spent his time in jail trying to get out of jail and probably not brushing up on his creationism. So the cool thing is, when you're debating him now, they're tired old arguments that we've had 7 or 8 years to get all the information for. So now pretty much none of his arguments have any sway anymore or even convincing to most people. But I will tell you, in the beginning of my episode about him, I was very sincere in how much he actually brought me to science. I mean, as much as I disagree with him, I gotta thank him for making me interested in science just by checking his videos.
Yeah, that's what Apologius says about Ken Ham.
I think, Tony, the same goes for me. The reason that I'm on Twitter and that I'm on YouTube is because of one video I saw of Kent Hovind, 100 Reasons Why Evolution is False.
Mm-hmm.
That's what drew me in and got me hooked on Kent Hovind.
Because mine. I think the one that kind of interested me was evidence for creationism, and it was a rare 2-hour video back in the day when you're only allowed to upload 15-minute videos. I don't know how it happened, but the guy got it up there, and I spent the time looking up every single claim in that video, and there had to have been maybe 100 and a half. It was a huge video full of claims, and I wrote down a rebuttal to every single one of them and got called out on the fact that I don't have a life.
Hey, Logic went through all of his claims on his 100 Reasons Evolution is Stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did.
Logic took on the very video that got me on Twitter.
Oh.
Sports Methods is a game everybody gets to play, and it's a game that our Tortukans cannot do.
So, are there any concluding statements anyone wants to make?
Just keep at it, kid.
Me.
Now, I have a question. I have a question for Tony.
Okay.
Are you aware of Aaron Ross debate tomorrow?
No.
Oh, yeah.
This is going to be fun.
So in my naivete, I did not do my research on a guy who asked to be in a debate with Aaron Ra, and I asked Aaron Ra if he wanted to debate this guy because the guy told me he wants to debate Aaron Ra, so I said okay. So I asked Aaron. Aaron agreed, and then we saw his content, and it's a train wreck. And tomorrow is going to be something. Is going to be something.
Is it going to be on this channel?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Tomorrow morning.
I should have.
That's right. You told me about that.
Yeah,
it's Aaron Ra and Mr. Intelligent Design,
aka Edgar, walking out of your ears as you hear him.
Okay. Wait, what's his name again?
Mr. Intelligent Design. He has a YouTube channel.
Oh no! Is he the guy that has the book that?
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't. The title is really long. It doesn't make any kind of sense. He's selling it on, I think, Amazon. He's got a theory that I asked him what predictions. I asked him once what predictions his theory has. He says, "Well, I predict that this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and this is going to happen." And I said, "Well, how do I test it now?" His response was, "You're just going to have to wait for those things to happen."
I watched a video that was 8 hours long, and it was entitled "Mr. Intelligent Design Explains Something." And in the entire 8 hours, he didn't explain one single thing about intelligent design.
Yeah, it'll change.
All he did was redefine words, redefine intelligence, redefine intelligent design. He never came to explaining one single thing.
Yeah, there's gonna. I have a feeling it's gonna be a hard video to watch tomorrow, but I'm gonna be there for the train wreck.
It will only be about an hour and a half. Aaron said he wants the video to be about an hour and a half, so that's where it'll be. So which is really not a whole lot of time when you think about it, but it's based on his.
Oh, it'll be an eternity for Edgar.
Based on Mr. Intelligent Design's talking, it might be a while on his side. So yeah, we're gonna get him to explain his position, and then Aaron will thoroughly rebut it.
Central Time, so 7:30 a.m. Pacific, which is really early for me, but I'm going to blast myself out because I want to hear this.
Yeah, people in the chat are asking 9:30 a.m. Central.
Yep. Yeah, it'll be something. So okay.
And Jackson and I get to moderate, so we.
And we'll
Oh, yes,
certainly
yes,
test our Roz and Ethel
Peter
on,
and I will be good cop, bad cop.
Good cop, bad cop. All right.
Yeah, I'm going to be the bad cop. I'm not about to let anyone ruin Aaron's reputation, so I'll try to keep it so that none of the people involved are going to explode.
I think it's going to be like going to the circus to watch just a show. Oh well. But anyways, so anything else to add, guys?
No, man, just keep doing it. Like you said earlier, just keep doing it. I'm enjoying this community. The more we support each other, it seems like the old guard of the atheists on YouTube, it kind of fell apart a little bit in terms of their camaraderie. I'm hoping that we can bring some of that back.
Yeah, they latched on to politics, and it went south real fast.
Tony, are you on Twitter?
Not. I mean, I am. I have a Twitter handle, but I am so Twitter moronic. I'm not. I never use it.
You could join us.
Yeah, because
on Twitter.
we have a group on Twitter, a DM group where we talk to each other and throw ideas around. So it would be good to have you in that group as well.
I'll be there. I'll check it out.
We've got Apologia in there too.
Jackson.
Apologia? Oh, cool.
Scientist Mel. So I think it's when we have a group where we can at least help each other and help promote each other, that's a good thing.
I agree.
All
right.
Lord Cropes is in there. I think you might be familiar with him, with the memes of Lord Cropes.
Whom?
Lord Cropes.
He does memes.
Probably not, but I'll.
He does the creationist misconception memes.
I don't have those. Okay, I've never seen any of those, so I'll look for that as well. Yeah, I'll join the Twitter. You'll see me in there probably tomorrow or whenever I get to my phone. I'm actually cooking right now, so I'm not doing anything directly.
You have a way to find him on Twitter, Jackson?
To find yeah, what's your
handle, Tony?
I believe I'll have to check on this. I believe it's HCTMRS.
Did you say HCTMRS?
It's basically how the initials for how creationism taught me real science.
Are you Kabbalah Zamba?
That's it.
Oh my goodness. Oh, okay. Well, there you are then.
Yep, I don't know how I got that name. I don't remember setting up the Twitter account, but I do remember trying to title it "How Creationism Taught Me Real Science" and just blew it.
There we go. All right, following you now. Okay. So, anyways,
cool.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone for coming. Thanks everyone for watching. And
oh yeah, now everybody that watches this channel has my Twitter handle now.
There you go. Look him up and start following him. He needs more followers.
Oh, that's a good thing. I forgot.
I find it a tactically useful place. Once you master Twitter haiku, it can be rather interesting.
Haiku.
Twitter haiku.
Haiku-icties.
Okay.
Anyways, all right.
Fun reference.
So,
all right, guys, good talking to you.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a nice night.
All right.
Okay. Bye, Tony.